To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Texas, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch is an immigration attorney. And here in Washington, D.C., Abel Nunez is the executive director of the Central American Resource Center known as CARACEN. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Abel Nunez, let me start with you. This crackdown has been gathering pace. We see across the country ICE agents have been going into people's homes. They've been arresting people on the street as well. And as I mentioned, we had that incident in the Los Angeles park. We saw video of ICE agents sweeping through a park, going after immigrants there. And as we heard the mayor of the city calling it a city under siege, under armed occupation. Those are very tough words from the mayor, very emotive language. But what is this doing to immigrant communities? Because we did hear from the former commissioner of the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, Doris Meisner, and she said the fear factor is an important part of the overall mass deportation initiative.
No, that is correct. This is about creating fears in communities so that they will self-deport. They know that they don't have the ability or the capacity to do it, although the new bill that was just approved, the new budget, adds, billions of dollars for immigration enforcement. The reality is that they don't have capacity. So they have to do it in a way that's very public, that one, creates fear in the community, but I think importantly for the Trump administration, shows their base that they are accomplishing what they promise in the campaign trail. But all it does is really create fear, and in practice it doesn't do much, because to date they haven't really increased the numbers of deportations from previous administrations. It has gone up a little bit in terms of arrests, but in deportations it remains pretty steady. And I think that because there is a process in this country, it's going to take a long time before it actually gets to the level that they want it to.
Kate, one of the things we are seeing with this massive sweep that's taking place across the country, that there are people who are undocumented who are getting swept up, as well as people who are here in the country legally, people who are citizens, people who are permanent residents.
That's right. They are just, it's very scattershot. It's very messy and chaotic, these actions that they're taking. Of course, we've seen the agents, we've seen the videos. They're in masks, they're in plain clothes. They're just going out on the street and arresting anyone that they can. And if somebody says, I'm a citizen or I'm a permanent resident, but I don't have my green card on me, they don't care. They will detain that person anyway. And they're also, of course, going and picking up what I'm calling the low-hanging fruit, the law-abiding immigrants who are in some type of legal process, and they're showing up for their court proceedings or their ICE check-ins. Many of these people entered the country with permission. They have work permits. They're literally doing everything that they are supposed to do and doing it the right way. And ICE is trying to boost their numbers, and so, as Abel said, and so they're going after people who are literally walking into their doors, and they're throwing them in these horrific detention centers, and they're separating families. I'm working on many cases as an immigration lawyer in Texas, just horrific stories that would break your heart, of children, babies being taken away from their parents, sent to separate detention centers, sent into foster care. I mean, the heartlessness and the cruelty of what they're doing to people really breaks hearts, breaks your heart.
All right, Kate, there's also been a development today in the so-called birthright citizenship case. A federal judge has certified a class action suit which blocks President Trump's executive order to try and block birthright citizenship. What is the implication of this ruling?
I think that's great. If we can get a class certified, it means that the executive order attempting to cancel birthright citizenship won't be going into effect. Of course, we all heard about the Supreme Court decision supposedly about birthright citizenship, but actually the decision was about nationwide injunctions and whether lower federal courts can issue emergency injunctions against policies that apply nationwide. And this has been a way that many lower federal courts have stopped policies on an emergency basis from going into effect. And the alternative, if the Supreme Court doesn't allow emergency injunctions, is class certification. And there's a reason that this vehicle hasn't been utilized. It's much more cumbersome, and it can take longer. It can take up to 6 months to have a class certified. So in the future, we might see policies go into effect and lower federal courts unable to stop them quickly. But I've thought all along in the case of birthright citizenship that we won't actually see the cancellation go into effect. It's so blatantly unconstitutional unconstitutional and illegal that at the end of the day, the federal court system just is not going to allow the president to cancel birthright citizenship through executive order. It's just not legally possible. And so there's been a lot of confusion about it because of the decision on nationwide injunctions. But to answer the question, class certification on the question of birthright citizenship is proper. I'm glad to hear it's coming, and it's what I expected, that we're not ultimately going to see this policy go into effect.
Abel Nunez, one of the cases that's been very closely followed is that of Kilmer Abrego Garcia. He's been in the news for quite a few weeks. President Trump deported him to El Salvador. Then the administration said that he was deported by mistake. He has now returned to the United States, but he's still being held. He's still being held in prison, and he's facing charges of trafficking. And the latest we heard that he's now being threatened with deportation again, even before he appears in court. What is this case about, and what is the message that it sends to others?
Well, I think that this is a very emblematic case of how the administration is processing. They want to break every rule, every due process, and they can't see themselves losing. So when Congressman Glenn Ivey, went after the senator went and shed light on the situation, that it was more than just about this gentleman. It was about the due process of every American. And I think people began to realize that this creates danger for them, that the state can pick you up and send you anywhere else where you would lose your rights. So this is about an administration trying to bully the judicial system into acquiescence to their policy and not taking them as an equal partner in government, right? They are the third branch, and they had set protections. So it's important for them not to see that they capitulated to the judiciary as they have been given orders. Remember, Mr. Abrego Garcia was protected from deportation prior to him to be sending to El Salvador. Then the administration said that they couldn't do anything about it, that it was up to the government of El Salvador, which they have a partner in, and the president of El Salvador said the same thing. And then when the political winds were changing, they immediately went to El Salvador without consulting the president of El Salvador and just brought him back. But they had to give him charges in order not to see as they bent their knee to the Supreme Court, or to the judiciary. So at this moment, what we're seeing is that this can lead to a constitutional crisis where you have the executive branch far exceeding their authority and not being able to be put in check either by the judiciary or an unwilling Congress, the legislature. So I think this is about the fundamental tenements of our judicial system, of our Constitution.
All right. Kate, what are your thoughts on the Abrego Garcia case? As Abel Nunez points out, it goes beyond actually immigration. It goes to fundamental legal rights in the United States, doesn't it?
Oh, I agree. 100%. And in terms of his specific case, of course, they brought him back, and this is the perfect uses of trumped up charges. They charged him with alien smuggling to save face, and they've got him in federal detention, and the charges against him are very flimsy. And the federal judge is finding all sorts of issues with the evidence and his continued detention. I will say, though, that my concern for him specifically is that when someone is granted withholding of removal, it protects them from deportation to the country from which they are protected, which for him is El Salvador. It does not protect them from removal to a third country. So I could definitely see a scenario in which the Trump administration attempts to remove him to a third country, even after all of this coverage, because these criminal charges are probably not going to stick, and they're certainly, not going to just release him out on the street, I wouldn't imagine, although that would be the proper thing to do and the fair and just thing to do for this poor man. But I think we might see him ultimately deported elsewhere.
Right, and on that question of deportation to a third country, we've just seen the Supreme Court allow the administration to deport some migrants to South Sudan. They have no connection with South Sudan, but that's where they're going to be deported to.
Yes, and that is very disturbing and disgusting and concerning, and I hope that everybody understands the far-reaching implications of the allowance of something like this. I mean, Trump himself has said he doesn't want to limit third country deportations to immigrants, that he would be just fine deporting U.S. citizens to other countries in this way, and that the Supreme Court allowed this behavior was shocking. surprising and concerning. And I don't know what the future holds with these third country removals, but I mean, it has been reported that people aren't just being deported and freed in a third country, they're being deported to a third country and being detained indefinitely without charges. And in some cases, there have been reports that they might even be sold into slavery. I mean, it's just unconscionable. And it's one of the ways in which I was very surprised to see the judiciary fall in line with the Trump administration. It's just flat out gross.
Abel Nunez, we're also hearing of these cases where citizens of a number of countries have had their temporary protected status terminated. These include people from Afghanistan, Cameroon, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And once this kind of status, this protected status, is terminated, it cannot be reinstated. So where does that leave the thousands of people affected by this?
Well, temporary protected status was designed as a temporary measure to protect individuals. Unfortunately, our Congress has been unable to reform laws to allow people that have been here for a long time, have been productive members of and citizens of this nation, to give them a path to legalization. But unfortunately, as this temporary statuses are taken away, they revert back to being undocumented. So immediately what that means is that they will lose their work permit, they will lose their driver's license, and be susceptible to deportation back to their country of origin. For a lot of countries, particularly like Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, they have been in this program for over 20 years, and that is because previous governments, both Democratic and Republican governments, have determined that the countries of origin could not absorb their nationals, so they've always protected them, and Congress has been unable to create a path out of that temporary status. So we're really looking at people suffering. These are people that have built lives, have property, businesses, again, and this is detrimental to our economy. In certain industries, they're hyper concentrated, and so what we will see is not just those families suffering, but also other members of the community, other businesses, and the community as a whole. So this is again a political ploy to create real pain in the community and punish people just for doing that. This is anti-immigrant, this is anti-poor, and unfortunately is a road that we are that we are continually to fight against, and we're asking our elected officials to really step in and provide protections for these people that deserve it, and because they have been contributing members to this nation.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Abel Nunez, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, thanks to both of you for being with us.